happens when we leave. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Free Agency Frenzy Emergency Podcast presented by Rockman Orthopedics, along with Derek Bodner and Bree producing. Of course, I am Devon Givens with you. The Sixers sign, or at least come to terms with, Derek, Trendon Watford from the Brooklyn Nets, 4-year player, started off in Portland with the Trailblazers, the last 2 seasons with the Brooklyn Nets, and now signing a 2-year deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. And as far as the numbers go, I know you'll have all of that taken care of. We can get into what it means for Guerschon Yabusele. We'll talk about a few other things here for this emergency pod. But Trendon Watford, Derek, not a name that we brought up a little bit earlier with Kyle Neubeck, as he is writing things right now for allphly.com, but an interesting name nonetheless.
Yeah, it is an interesting name. And, after a couple of solid seasons and super low minute roles, he came out last year for the Nets and had a pretty decent season on really low stakes basketball, but still a pretty decent season. 10.2 points, 3.6 rebounds, 2.6 assists, shot 47% from the field, only 33% from 3-point range. We'll get into that. I think he is a guy who has shown some intrigue in his short time in the league. How much you can count on, we will see. A lot of that's going to come down to the shot. He shot the ball pretty well during his previous 2 seasons on really low sample size, but the shot, I think, is going to be a question mark. But I do think, like I said, I do think he has some intrigue. Pretty good size, can put the ball on the deck a little bit, has a little bit of passing to his game, not a terrible rebounder. I think there's some things you can work with there. A lot of it is going to come down to the shot. If he had a shot, he'd probably get more than the minimum. It is a 2-year minimum salary contract. So you're talking about just under $2.5 million for the first year, right around $2.9 million. I think it is $2.8 million for the second year. That all counts against the cap, because if you're listening to our 3 p.m. show, we would have gone over how a 2-year minimum contract does not get prorated down like a 1-year minimum contract does. So you get the full cap hit, but it is a pretty reasonable contract. I think the fact that you got a guy who has a chance to play some 3-4 hybrid on a minimum salary contract and has some intrigue, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too, especially where you see that there wasn't a lot of money thrown around for Watford. Stands around 6'8", 6'9", strong body, Derek. We talked about this before we came on the show, and we jumped in with everybody here. He did play with Mikal in Brooklyn, so I had a chance to see him quite a bit. He played 60-plus games in that season. Last year, he played about 40-plus games for the Brooklyn Nets. But for me, watching him during that time, of course, watching him a little bit closely during that season, and then last year, here's what I feel about him. Old man game, more below the basket guy, but of course he can dunk on you at 6'8", 6'9". He will surprise you from time to time, turn the ball over a little bit when he's going to the basket, one-hand flush. Certainly can finish the 2-handed dunks, but an old man game, good handle for his size at 6'8", 6'9". Decent passer, unselfish as well. He kind of reminds me, Derek, of a Kyle Anderson type. Okay. When you look at him, the shooting is not like that where he has that weird pitch in his shot, but he has that type of game, but much stronger. Solid help defender, cerebral, doesn't get sped up too much, plays at his pace, brings energy off the bench, strong team guy, confidence, and he's tough. So he just goes out there and plays basketball. So wasn't one that I had on the list, or you or Kyle had on the list a little bit earlier. Bree didn't talk about Watford either, but it was one that I just kind of overlooked because I didn't think that this was the type of direction that they would go. But those are some of the things that I see. And in the end of just laying out the type of player, he's just a basketball player, man. He can go out there. He can handle the ball. When we talk about having ball handlers, he is one that you don't have to worry about, kind of in the mode of just bringing the basketball up the floor sometimes to take some of the pressure off of guys. He can do that. Has a decent enough wingspan with that 6'8", 6'9" frame as well. And again, man, he's a strong dude. So again, when I talk about he plays with a lot of energy, he'll make a pass, he'll make a basket. And even on the passes, if he makes a good pass, he's putting his arms up. He's doing all that stuff, gesturing to the crowd and all those types of things. So he's into the game with the crowd as well. We'll talk a little bit of smack while he's out there on the floor. And he's just one of those guys that you can look at and say, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how the rotation looks that particular night. If he's having one of those nights, it's the stat line of 11, 4, 3, maybe knocks down the 3, gets to the free throw line 2 to 3 times in that time out there on the floor. But a solid pickup that, again, you know how we do this, and Kyle and Bree, and we talk about it, and Rich. Sometimes when guys are brought up that we don't bring up, you get frustrated with yourself as if you overlook them and don't know what you're doing a little bit. So I was a little ticked off that this name popped up. Saw it, thought about it, but I said, nah, they're not going to go after Trendon Watford, but they went after Trendon Watford. So those are some of my takeaways from watching them play in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when we're preparing for free agency, like we're focused on, what's the market like for Grimes? What's the market like for Yabusele? We probably didn't focus quite as much on what minimum contracts they might go out
Yeah,
and pursue.
yeah.
Because quite frankly, that list is going to be, 50 deep. Like if you really want to be exhaustive, we only have an hour show there at 3 p.m. So don't beat yourself up too much. I do like the fact that you had a cousin on his team, a year ago, because quite frankly, I don't watch a whole lot of Brooklyn Nets basketball when I don't have to. So this is great. We got a lot of in-person scouting here to go off of. I do like what I've seen though. And it
Mm-hmm.
is, like you said, someone who seems like he knows how to play the game, has pretty good, okay, not athleticism per se, but just under 6'9" in shoes, over a 7'2" wingspan at his combine. He's got some tools to work with. And I think the way you phrased it, plays under control, doesn't get sped up, is exactly it. And the Sixers just quite frankly don't have a lot of those kind of guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is, look, ideal world, would you trust a shot? Yeah, you would. Like I said earlier, if as my cat is absolutely, I usually, he's got
Part of the show.
a little thing right here, a bed to sit on. I usually move it when we do a show because I specifically don't want him like climbing on my back as I'm doing a show. We had to do an emergency pod. I was out. I just got in. So full
Part of the
studio
show,
isn't set
man.
up. He's part of
Part
the
of the
show. He
show.
likes it. He likes it. He feels like a star. No, I do, like I said, I would love shooting. You weren't going to get him for the minimum fee if you had a reliable jump shot. He does do other things on the court. And quite frankly, just a guy at that size who can handle, who can pass. He's probably one of your top 3 or 4 passers on the roster right now, which says as much about the
Yes.
roster as it does Watford. But I do think he's going to add a really much necessary skill set.
Yeah, so he does bring that. And to your point, one of the better passes on the team already. I can see him on the floor if he's having a good game, if it's one of those crunch time situations where, Derek, he might be the one that's inbounding the basketball for Nick Nurse to throw in, to throw things in. So there's that. And so it already becoming one of the better passes on the team. So with this, as Gene says, I need to get a goldfish or something to keep up with the pets with all of you guys on the show that have the pets. What does this mean now for Guerschon Yabusele? For him, still out there, no news yet for he or Quentin Grimes, but with a player like this in the front court, does this impact Guerschon Yabusele's chances of coming back? And if so, how?
So in theory, it doesn't really, because this is a minimum salary contract. Like I said, it is a slightly higher, like maybe, 150K higher than your prorated minimum. That's not a big deal. This was basically a slot. The Sixers only lost about 150K in available cap space because they previously had an incomplete roster charge on their books. So this is a minor deal in terms of how it impacts Yabusele. I think the gist that I've gotten is that there's just pessimism over whether or not that taxpayer mid-level would be enough to bring him back. And, I think some of that will be fleshed out over the next 24 hours. We'll see whether or not he signs. Maybe something doesn't really come to fruition for Yabusele and they have a chance. But no, I don't think this specifically, because even if they brought him back, they needed someone of this archetype just to fill out the roster. We went over earlier today how they have, 4 or 5 quality guards that you trust. They have 3 wings that you trust if they're healthy, but that's a different story. They have 4 centers and they have legitimately no power forwards. So adding this one doesn't mean you can't add another one. In fact, I would argue you still very much need another power forward, or at least somebody who can go between the 3 or the 4 or go between the 4 and the 5. So no, I don't think this move specifically takes Yabusele out of the picture. I just worry about what else is going on across the league that might make them less confident that they're going to be able to bring him in.
So as we finish things off with the show, as Kyle jumps right in here, as we finish things off with the show a little bit earlier for our free agency frenzy show from 5 to 7, Kyle, as you jump right in, and Derek says this doesn't necessarily really impact the guy Guerschon Yabusele. coming back or, hitting the market, the Spurs do go and give a big number to a front court player and Luke Cornett for $41 million over 4 years. So with that, Kyle, and you look at Yabusele, that's one team that we continue to hear about having interest in Yabusele. Then the trade took place between the Brooklyn Nets and the Denver Nuggets, where that was also a spot potentially for Guerschon Yabusele. Not to say that they still don't have interest, but also signing Bruce Brown, bringing in Cam Johnson. At least the names that we had heard and you had heard, because you did report some things on that about teams that had interest in Yabusele. Those are two right off the bat, though, that have already made moves.
Yeah, I would just say that I would join the growing circle of Sixers reporters who said right after this that they're skeptical that Yabu will return. I don't think it's necessary. Like them signing Trendon Watford, I don't think has any connection to that. As Derek just laid out with the salary stuff, like, this doesn't really impact their ability to make a compelling offer. I do think the stuff that is floating around out there, it seems like it's unlikely that Yabusele is going to return, but I don't think that that's necessarily different than a month ago, a month and a half ago. We've been talking through this with Yabu for most of this offseason that we thought everything we've heard is Quentin Grimes is more likely to return, and everything we've heard is that Yabusele is, even if you were to say it's a toss-up, I think is probably stronger, more positive or stronger than we felt based on everything we've heard. So I would still look at Denver, honestly, Devon, because I think with the money that they opened up by trading Porter Jr.'s contract for Cam Johnson's, I think they have some, they might have, Derek might correct me on this, I think they have access to an MLE that they can use that Yabusele would probably fit into. So I would still keep an eye on them. But we shall see. Time will tell. There's no immediate reason to say he's definitely not coming back. I just think it's kind of status quo for the time being.
Okay. Kyle also joins us after putting some words together at allphly.com on the signing for Trendon Watford. But for the people who have yet to go read the story, hope everybody does. If you haven't, go sign up with our Make Our Move intro offer, $36 to step on in as a diehard member for our community. Kyle, what were your initial reactions to the Trendon Watford signing?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting in the sense that he is nominally a power forward, but I'm not sure he does the power forward things that people are maybe expecting or wanting when they said this team needs a 4, right? Now, that's not to say it's a bad signing. I think what he does bring is an interesting dribble drive game. Like, this is a guy who's 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, who is a below the rim player and still manages to shoot somewhere between 65 to 70% at the rim, right? He's got like a real old man YMCA, like just keeps you off balance. I think has added some strength as well as he's gotten older, which kind of accentuates what he does. He also has a pretty developed runner floater game. And so, look, are they going to tap into that very much here versus a rebuilding Brooklyn situation? Probably not. I think the most important thing might be the playmaking, right? Like, I think he is a good passer, especially at that size and at that spot. And as we look at this roster and you say, hey, maybe Maxi's not a true blue point guard. Maybe McCain is not. We know VJ is not. You're going to have to get passing from other spots on the roster. I think they got it in this guy as a rotation player. So you take someone like him, you take a Janai Broom, you start to just cobble together more feel, more playmaking, more passing. I think it ends up better offense. Defensively, I'm still a little skeptical. Like, he's been better than we thought coming out of college, but he's at least got a big body. And if he can stay with guys, he's got the size and the length to contest. So overall, I don't think there's much to complain about here. Just certainly can't be the only power forward that they get this summer.
If the bottom bar on a minimum contract is Kyle Lowry, this is way up higher. This is a home run compared to that.
And by the way, he's only 24. I believe he turns 25 in November. So when we talked, all last season about all these old guys, and they've said end of the year, we're going to try to get younger, more athletic. He's not a great athlete. I think that's actually one of his real limitations is athletically. But he is certainly younger, and he's got some room to grow depending on the role they put him in.
Yeah, I'm looking at Follow the Water in the chat saying, love the Watford signing, though, to be honest. They needed a true power forward so badly. Well, Follow the Water, he's just not a true power forward. He's a power forward in size, height-wise, 6'8", 6'9", player with that wingspan. He is tough. He can play physical, but has a lot of guard skills out there on the floor. Super chat from our GM, Vinny, saying, what do y'all think about the Nickeil Alexander-Walker trade to the Hawks?
I mean, you're talking about they basically just signed him and gave up a second-round pick for a sign and trade. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a fair deal. Like, what was it, 462?
462. Yep. Yeah, 462.
I mean, Kyle, you know what Kyle thought because he tweeted out. They're having a really good offseason. Now, some of those offseason moves won't pay dividends until next June, but they could pay massive dividends. I think they're having a good summer.
Does that do anything for the Grimes number? 4 for 62.
That's what, a little over 15 per.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, look, Grimes is he's not getting under 15. I'll tell you that.
All right.
I would add that
I still fundamentally think that Grimes is in the 15 to 20 range, just because he's running out of suitors to get more than that, and taking the qualifying offer, if you will get 20 this year, is a massive risk. But
yeah.
I would just add that I think Atlanta's whole thing is that they've upgraded the team, and like Porzingis is the short term, take a flyer on him, see what he's got. But even if they're not good, that pick they got in that Pelicans trade has so much upside that's like, okay, whatever. We'll take another crack at it in a week East. If not, we got options moving forward. So I think they split the difference very nicely, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker helps with that.
Absolutely. Well, Sixers agreed to terms, or set some terms as things become official in a couple of days. But the Sixers and Trendon Watford, 2-year deal to become the newest member of the Philadelphia 76ers. One more super chat before we step away. Does Karis LeVert signing in Detroit signal the end of Malik Beasley's career? That's from Marcus Blackstock. I don't know. That's going to play out.
It's not looking positive. I'd say that, Marcus, between the LeVert signing and then our friend Jake Fisher reported tonight that they're looking at a potential Malik Monk trade as well. So if you're Malik Beasley right now, you better make sure you have already shut down that FanDuel account or Bet365 or wherever you've been looking at wagers at, buddy. Be careful out there, because Johnny Law is coming. Did we lose Devon?
No, I'm here.
He muted himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just muted myself as I was swapping out my AirPods. All right, Trendon Watford, the first signing for the Sixers on the free agent market, as we still await the fate of Quentin Grimes and Guerschon Yabusele and their careers with the Philadelphia 76ers, or potentially elsewhere. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Derek and I will be with you. Kyle will stay at practice and do a little extensive work for the first Summer League practice. So it'll be Derek, myself, Bree, all of you tomorrow at 3 p.m. as we continue the PHLY Sixers Free Agency Frenzy. And as always, it's brought to you by Rothman Orthopedics. Rothman Orthopedics, visit rothmanortho.com/PHLY. If you are in need of some attention, they've got you covered. Once again, at rothmanortho.com/PHLY. So for Derek, Kyle, and Bree, the president of basketball operations here with us, I'm Devon. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 3 p.m. as free agency is underway. We'll discuss it all with you tomorrow at 3 right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. See you then.